Hello again, thank you for joining me for another video. So today is the nature of reality jinky whiteboard style. I gave a talk at a Holistic Expo last weekend. So this was my first experience doing a public talk in any sort of way in front of real life people. I'll put a little clip in here of the talk so you can understand subtle energies. And the whole process of the spiritual journey, in my opinion, is refining your perception of the subtle field and all of the stuff that goes with it. And that it was a little hard to hear, and you can't see the whiteboard in a way that I feel like will help anybody who's watching it from my channel. So I'm going to recreate it, and I think if I can if you can grasp this, then we have lots of room to talk about a whole lot of other concepts. It's like a structure. Obviously I'm not the first person to come up with this stuff. What the important thing I think of note is that it is what came by way of fine-tuning my perception and looking, really trying to find words that are familiar but also neutral in a sense, and using those concepts which are finding the concepts that can help people understand what's happening in terms of their own awakening, what's coming online, what they're observing from other people, the whole nature of reality that we're experiencing here from these physical bodies. Some of the words are familiar and everybody's heard them, but there is, and this is the important thing, they aren't just concepts. There's actually an energetic difference between these words. And so if you can grasp the discerning of these levels and the subtle variations in the frequency of these ideas, then you have room to start creating in a much more robust fashion. So let's see if my handy dandy little whiteboard. Okay, I'll add more on as I move on over. I was hoping I could get this like in there, but better. Sorry, janky whiteboard with the, oh, where am I? Duct tape and all. Okay. All right, so the two big points to remember. This is this is like, pretend it's a quarter. Pretend it's the size of a quarter, and it is in there's a tiny little edge around it, a little light edge around it, which differentiates it from the medium of totality. And that little quarter is shining this little everything that you experience. On one side of the quarter is a mirror, the other side is that blackness. So this is our anchor point, higher self, whatever you want to call it, little tidbit of totality, and the little beautiful fractal self. So one of the things I mentioned in the talk is that the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. And I think it's an important thing to remember as you are trying to find a structure for the frequencies and ways that substance shows up out of the medium of the mystery, the allness of allity. So I'm going to name a bunch of stuff, but don't forget that in the naming is not the the limiting. It's limiting by name, but it isn't limiting by potential, possibility, other things. This isn't the everything you could. You get it. You got me. Here's Ba. We're the little Bas down here. The Egyptians used the word Ba to describe the fractal, and I think it's the best use it. Yeah, I think that describes things well. We get a little bit confused when we start going into body, mind, and then all of the layers of the Ba with the mental, emotional, DNA, all of the stuff. The fact that it's prescripted inside of a logic framework of what is Earth giving off, the nature of what Earth is providing in terms of nourishment and prana and life-giving force. So you don't necessarily have to be a soul to look like a Ba, because Earth itself can hold that and recreate that frequency through the prana, and already having established the logic of the pattern. Okay, nerdy stuff. Coming off of the Ba is the Ka, or what a lot of people call aura, that little 6-foot field that comes off of the human being, and holds energy patterns of our thoughts. And so if you have like muscle tension, like it literally kind of shows up in the way that you are emitting your little bit of electrical feedback into the space around you. So tense muscle gives off a certain kind of electrical impulse. A loose and relaxed muscle gives off another kind of impulse. Pain, all of these things kind of also carry a bit of a color to them because of the nature of their frequency. So, blackness is, usually pain, grief, condensed, really condensed energy. Red is a little bit, it's a little bit kind of oscillates at that frequency. Blue is a little bit more oscillates at that frequency, and they all give off a little bit of a different frequency, and that is red. You're able to discern that in a person's aura, even if you don't see and call to mind the color that it's attached to. That's just the nature of, we kind of already live in a field of this type of energy and names and attachments to these ideas, and just because we aren't seeing them show up like on a paint, like the reflection of green, we still associate a frequency to that and can read that in a person's aura. And it's like some people who are full of a lot of pain and dense energy and fiery energy, holes in their aura and things like that, will perceive that in a more subtle fashion and act accordingly. The next space after the Ka is it's a collective harmonizing intelligence. There's an intelligence in that space that harmonizes all of our auric fields, and it creates, like when people are talking about the collective, tuning into the collective, there's a literal intelligence that exists there within the Earth's resonance, that in the same way that all things on the Earth work in a harmony and a tandem together, and there's an intelligence that's actually a perceptible field in and of itself. So after that is the lower astral. The lower astral is kind of like an imprint that is on the medium of totality, of dead things. The lower astral is dead things, and by dead things I mean like it's active but it has no life force of its own. So things like technology, some of the mediums for storing information would be there. Yeah, so like an imaginative space that is actually just, it's not living, it's dead is the best way to, it has no life substance of its own. So the upper astral collective, this is a collective space in the astral fields that I'm describing, is for living but not physical. Living but not physical. So there's a little physical imprint there. So, you know, you can see ancestors, speak with ancestors there. Some of the content of, you know, parts of Earth's memories are stored there. So it's like not, it still useful information that's there. And you can communicate with like plant medicines, for example, from that level. So it's like more of the consciousness of, or the mind space of a collective intelligence, but they aren't physicals the way that they're not as dense, so less dense, I guess is the best way to say that. Perceptive, perceivable. All of this area is where a lot of people tune in to gather and garner information to do things like psychic readings and tapping into divination techniques. And so you can understand why there's, you know, some wariness, because it isn't necessary. It's still a pretty dense energy. It's still pretty dense. It still has the potential to be polluted, because there is so much collective information there. So you have to be pretty highly trained to be able to discern appropriately what is the person's like inner spark, what are they lighting up, and discerning like that they're lighting those things up because it's going to be helpful to them, as opposed to something that's being on a loop and used. So you have to be a little wary of that, and making sure that the person that you are going to for advice in that regard is reading correctly your spark versus the kind of collective intelligence there, and what, because the collective intelligence has its own agenda, as it were, and that isn't necessarily what the soul should be aligning to. That's getting a little complicated, but these are the kinds of things, once you kind of have a general outline of how this stuff works, a structure of it, something to move in and with and around, then you can start making very sovereign type of decisions for yourself within the scope of understanding how these frequencies are influencing you from the different, you know, once you perceive them, you know, just like you can perceive fire and back away from it. If you couldn't perceive fire until it was too late, that would really suck. But, you know, you can, a whole bunch of things warn you about fire off in the distance before it ever gets close to you. And as you perceive these things, you can figure that stuff out too. So on the other side of the living collective, where our ancestors and those kinds of people are hanging out, there's a bit of a wall. And as you're going through the process of awakening, and I think this is kind of like the whole thing, is like you are, there's a bit of a the logic to the wall is hard to describe exactly. It's that line where the immaterial becomes material. there's a line. And so as you're awakening and you become, true to the totality of the immaterial substance, the nature of reality itself, that substrate that we are inexplicably made of. Until that time, there's like a perceptive wall. There's like you can't perceive beyond this wall. So you're just relating from the body mind. Essentially, each one of these little layers are self-consistent. They can exist all by themselves. They are a self-consistent bit of logic, bit of frequency, bit of reality. And then there is a tuning between. So when you have two different things, a language is needed to communicate between the two. In the same way that osmosis occurs, like there is a bit of a lock and key that occurs. And so when your life starts having all these synchronicities show up, the locks and the keys are lining up. So the frequencies are able to harmonize, and you can switch between them without getting confused. But a lot of people hit the wall and then just bounce back. They're just, that's the frequency. So the little quarter, the totality of the higher self, shoots down, enlivens meets the prana of earth, enlivens it into the form of a human, and then it's just bouncing back from the wall, as opposed to feeding this larger toroidal field of all of it. I'm trying to take big kind of, it's bigger than this, but I want to give you something to like work with, and then you have to expand from there in your own knowingness. Beyond the wall is where the oversoul frequency stays. It's a more dense energy, but it's not physical. So fairly dense, fairly capable of this like compression action, kind of from here to here. It's like compression in that oversoul space. The oversoul can have fractals in other realities, other universes, other simulations, even not even real, or not even tangible material. It can have a fractal that's a rock, and just gathering information. You think about how much information about frequencies that a rock, which never moves and has no other purpose but to be, is actually able to garner from its physical existence. So fractals aren't always beings necessarily, but they can be. And I think this is where, you can have an aspect which is, an alien species, and an angelic species, a sun in a far off galaxy. You can have that kind of thing going on, and that information, because it's also connected into your stream here, can be useful and can also be pollutive if you don't recognize, if you're just kind of waking up and you're like, I'm a Pleiadian, or you're just waking up and you're like, I'm an angel, you're still anchored in here as this, but you have access to the information of that. And the more you are able to be kind of mind melded with that aspect of yourself, you get good information. Just you have to be wary of the fact that that is not true for everyone just because it's true for you. So some people have a timeline that includes being a different species like that. And other people will have timelines which is always and only connected to Earth. They don't have any interest as a soul to be connected anywhere else. Both of those things can be true, and it's true by way of the oversoul. Hopefully that makes sense. It is not the case that every person that is a fractal human on Earth will someday become part of an alien species. You aren't hardwired into an evolutionary cycle of anything other than what your higher self and soul have. You have your own walk with God, each and every one of us. And that's an important thing to always keep true, that truth is essential for everything else to work properly. That is the nature of free will, and it gives God free reign. I don't know how to say that in a way that doesn't offend people's ears with the word God, but that's the way it is. And I will drink to that. Thank you, sir. Okay. Oversoul. Relay. Alternate universes. So then beyond that, we have the upper echelon karmic heaven. And, this is like, is it? Yeah, 7. No, that's 8. So upper echelon, 7 from the bottom. Upper echelon karmic heaven is like, you got so good at figuring out cause and effect, where positivity adds more positivity, that you've created a nice little field to access that feels like heaven, that exists as a heavenly space. A lot of people I've noticed, I've been exposed to in the last few years with regards to the spiritual movement, who kind of poo-poo religion and worship of God, misunderstand what communion and worship can be. So if you change that word instead to a devotion, it's creating a field of love that is more tangible. It's creating a space of love that is more tangible. And to the point that as long as you're able to be conscious in that space, it is a heavenly space that you're in. That's a frequency that we are able to perceive from here. Hopefully I said that in a way that made sense to people. Yeah, we'll leave it there. Beyond that is like Nirvana Shambhala level. The frequency of this is even lighter than, so where this is like still has a bit of a remembrance of the physicality. This is just getting slightly less, so you can be in the same state of like a heavenly bliss experience, still having that experience of it, but not necessarily in the form of a body anymore. So that's more light. It's more in the karmic heavens, you'd be more like, I love my family, and I'm having the experience of, after they passed on, I have angels, I have God, I have this beautiful kingdom that I'm in. And so the Nirvana Shambhala level would be just less remembering of the physical self, so more of just the spirit. So that might show up in just like, you're just blue light. That's the best way I could describe it. But they're really good at interacting with us and helping us, because they're not experiencing things from any sort of remembrance of pain. So they can really just like coat a human being with so much love and joy, and really great healing comes from there. This is it's 25 minutes. Okay. Beyond the levels of Nirvana, it becomes even less dense, less anything that we would put into a category of formed at all. So more of the forces and structure of the spiritual reality exists on the other side of that nirvanic space. And so that subtle energy space I would call music, light, and holy vowels. Hello, Crow. Have you come to say hello? music, light, and holy vowels. And this is where the sound of creation and it intermingles with the light of this reality in a way that starts swirling into condensing. That's a good way to put it. And there's actually a music to it. Some people who have had very mystical experiences, it's a real frequency of like this, like, you know, they talk about the angelic angels singing. It's like literally like that, and nothing else. And that's what the it's like tuning into something that is, it just, there's a discernment that comes to your perception as you like practice, practice focusing. So we get into the meditative state so we can practice focusing and discerning and just being with these one very, like, if you only were experiencing the sense of blue and nothing else. It's that level of focus. It's a type of meditation that helps you train. So the next level so like, just to be clear, so perception, no perception, because this is your just subjective self. You are perceiving nothing because you are just the subjective awareness. Dense, not dense. Time, not time. And on a continuum. It's actually all inside of you, but this is a weird flippy thing that I actually have no idea how to describe whatsoever in any capacity that I could draw on a whiteboard. Right? This weird like Mobius thing, but not moving and not anything other than this weird quarter. Don't know how to explain it. Like a hologram, if the hologram was inverted. There's no way to put that into words that we see. I can't do it. Somebody else will have to do that. Okay, so then creator imagination ideas. These things have a literal force to them. They could be discerned and mapped in the same way that gravity, light, and sound. There's a frequency to imagination. There's a frequency to the creative force. There's a frequency to the nature of ideas. They come into existence with a very particular frequency. On the other side of that, in the thoughtless, if you will, formless void, when a lot of people are meditating their little hearts out, it is hoping to get to that space where I am nothing, there's nothing to do, there's nothing to be. It's just when you feel that frequency, it is all-pervading peace. No movement. That's why they call it the formless void. But it still has a reality to it. It isn't without consciousness, if that makes sense. I don't know how to say it another way. Yeah, we'll leave it there. Beyond the formless void, if you've reached the formless void, you might be able to tell that it isn't the end and that there's more. There's more. It's like if you went through death and went through heaven and went through beyond anything that could be known, there's this sense that beyond anything that can be known, there's yet some other quality. And this is where you start getting in touch with the true creator, the mystery of reality itself. And so that goes into very wild stuff. It'll get your kundalini all active if you reach it. It'll be poking at you. So it's truth receptivity and that which is able to exist. And these concepts are getting harder to fully delineate. And then, I'm just back to that reflective anchor, higher, uppercase S-E-L-F, self, which is this relay. And so, as you're tuning in and getting your locks and keys and finding the perceptive abilities within you to notice these, the fine tuning, there begins a communication through all of these. There begins a communication which becomes holy, because you are accepting rather than the small experience of what's already here, which in itself is holy. I'm not calling that not holy. But it brings you into the unfolding of reality in terms of co-creating, a co-will, a recognition of your own spark that is part of the totality. It's like being able to see it instead of, if you're too in it, it's hard to actually see it. And it is quite extraordinarily exquisite beauty to it that is, it's such a fine, awe-inspiring thing to get a glimpse of. So I think there's a lot of room to really kind of understand some of the, once you get a bit of the structure of everything, you can really kind of drill down into each of these, the self-consistent frequencies. You can really drill down and get an idea of how you are being expressed, and you might learn to appreciate the beauty of and the holy shitness like what that is reality, and the beauty of life can kind of unfold again in a new and profound way. So I'll leave it there and maybe do a follow-up video after this. I hope you are well. Talk to you soon. Bye.